Welcome back to the Rebuilt Parish podcast. Today, we have such a treat for you. We are joined by Lisa Brenninkmeyer, founder and chief purpose officer of Walking with Purpose. Now, if your parish has Walking with Purpose, or you've ever been a part of a Walking with Purpose Bible study, you know what a joy Lisa is and just how faithful she is to her own calling and the mission of Christ. If you haven't yet, get ready. Lisa is full of energy and insights. And in this episode, she shares some of the raw truths behind what led to Walking with Purpose. And now she's inspiring thousands of women all over the world. We'll see you inside the episode. Well, hi there, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be with you all. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
This is exciting. We've got Tom here in the studio as well as co-host. So thank you, Tom, for joining us.
Yeah, it's great. Well, if Lisa's on, I want to. If there's a chance to have a conversation with Lisa, I want to be on that conversation. So yeah.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't? This is exciting. I told Jeremy I'm going to try really hard not to fangirl on this episode. So just, forgive me if I get really excited about stuff here today.
Oh, you're sweet.
Well, Lisa, could you just start by sharing a bit about your faith journey? It's such a fun one. So maybe you could share a little bit about what it was like growing up Protestant, what led you to the Catholic Church, and kind of what helped you in that conversion.
Sure. So yeah, I grew up Protestant. I grew up specifically an evangelical Protestant, very much loving my experience. I had the gift of having parents who really poured into me and poured into me spiritually, modeled the Christian life really well, and then exposed me to the best of what the evangelical church had to offer. And so my experience growing up was overwhelmingly positive. I was introduced to the Lord in a personal way at a very young age. Was discipled well my whole life, taught how to study the Bible, how to memorize scripture from the time really I was in probably first grade. That's when I can really remember being intentionally poured into in that way, and really assumed I would either become a pastor's wife or marry a youth pastor or do something very much within the Protestant church my whole life. But during college, I met my now husband, and he was a cradle Catholic and really had no desire to come over to my side of the river. And my thought was, I have a personal relationship with Christ. I can just carry that wherever I go. This probably won't be that big a deal, that big a switch. I converted to Catholicism my senior year of college, was baptized. I'd never been baptized growing up. So when I was little, we went to a church that baptized people kind of at that point of decision, like 14. And then by the time I was 14, we were in a Protestant church that baptized babies. So I'd never been baptized. So I was baptized a Catholic, so received the sacraments of baptism and First Communion at the same time, and came into the church and went into my senior year of college. And really had received, if I am honest, very poor formation, as in, I think I went to Mass 3 times my senior year, and I thought that was fine. Like, I didn't even know I was supposed to be going every week. So.
Hey, can I pause you there a second?
Yeah.
Because I just, a practical question. Where'd you go to college?
St. Olaf College in Minnesota, Northfield,
Okay.
Minnesota.
The second question was, it wasn't a big deal for you. That seems kind of, a lot of times that Protestant Catholic, that's a big jump, but it wasn't a big deal to you?
It wasn't a huge intellectual deal for me. It was more a big deal in the sense of belonging. So yeah, really, because my introduction to the church, my RCIA was so poor, I didn't even recognize the degree to which I was making this real, there were some real theological differences. Honestly, the way my RCIA went, which was one-on-one with an older priest, was, he was like, yeah, we've got some extra sacraments here that you don't have in the Protestant church. And if you like them, if they're helpful, great. If not, well, and I was like, they're not very helpful. I don't even really know what they mean or what they are. And so I felt zero guilt, not understanding them, not taking advantage of them. Now, I will say, had he gone for full court press with me, I probably would have dug in and not converted. Because I was a pretty well-formed Protestant who loved the church. And I think I probably would have heavily pressured my husband to convert to the Protestant faith. So I look back on that and I could be really frustrated and kind of bitter because that lack of formation really was a significant thing for me for about a decade. But I do wonder if I would have made the change. And
Yeah,
if,
that's
whatever, the Lord knows how things evolve. But when so we got married and I moved into the English speaking German Catholic Church, and all I can say is just not very friendly. Like the entry into all of this was not friendly. And that was a very big deal to me. Like I'd grown up not just feeling at home in the church, and I did. Like I knew our church kitchen. I knew where all the serving pieces were because every Wednesday night the youth made dinner for the parish or the church, and everybody came, and I was so at home there. My dad had an extra key to the church because he was always the last one out because we visited with people till the end. It was very much an experience of family and belonging. And it was really the opposite of that for me when I became Catholic and moved to Germany. In fact, what I would have said is 1, people don't even smile. 2, they don't look at me. And 3, when I invited the pastor over to dinner, he looked at me and he's like, I have a lot going on. Like, I don't have time for this. So it was a real shock to me. Sure. And I immediately became very unhappy and had quite a few experiences in those first 10 years of being Catholic as we lived internationally that were not from an English, predominantly English speaking person's perspective, really positive. And it wasn't really until we moved to the States. And by this, can I back up and say much of this is by choice because I chose to worship in English, even as I was becoming fluent in those languages. I always chose the Church of Americans, and maybe that was a poor move, right? Because when you think about how global our church is and how beautiful that is, especially when we were living in Mexico, I think I could have had an incredible experience that I didn't. But when we moved to the States after being married about 10 years, living out of the country for those 10 years, that's really when things started snowballing for me with really understanding what it meant to be Catholic. And the reason why was because I had led a Bible study in Mexico, which was really a Bible study of seekers. So my whole life, I have really had a heart for people who don't know God or find it really hard to be in relationship with Him. I grew up going to public school, had a very positive experience in public school in Minnesota. And I think one of the benefits of that was that I learned to deeply love and be in relationship with people who believe differently than me. And it wasn't even like an intentional thing, like I'm going to go be friends with that person because they don't know Jesus and I'm going to help them. They were just the people I knew and loved. And so, but sharing with them naturally about the difference that Christ was making in my life was something that just was a part of friendship. And so in Mexico, I was leading a small group in my home that I couldn't even really call it a Bible study, although I've been leading Bible studies since college. That was another thing I was doing. But this particular group was really a group of seekers, and it was really intentional dinner conversation. I'd make dinner. We'd talk about how can a good God exist if He's in control and we have so much suffering and evil in the world? We talk about why on earth can you read the Bible and actually believe it's anything but an ancient book? And so really apologetics, but very conversationally as their questions came up. And we had a parish priest who came in and caught wind of what we were doing and forbade me to do it.
Whoa.
And
under what grounds, or what was it?
Oh, you don't know the story? Okay, this is kind of a good story.
No, under what authority? By what authority?
Because I was a layperson and because I was a woman. So
Whoa.
Let's go with this discussion. Okay, so
Oh my gosh.
And I am a rule follower. I really am. I really like having
but that's
that's not really my personality. And I really like having authority over me. I consider that protection and coverage spiritually. So to have what was my spiritual authority at that time being very against what I was doing really caused a real crisis for me, because I also had these people in my home who, mind you, were not attending our parish.
Yeah.
So, and I knew if I stopped doing this, they would just fade off. I didn't know where exactly they would go. And so I told him this. I'm like, this isn't even like an official Bible study. And he just spoke super strongly to me about not doing it. Then he started announcing at the end of Mass, right before the benediction, every week, he would say, and mind you, we're in this little parish of English-speaking people, so everybody knows who he's talking about. There may be, I don't know, 75, 80 of us in the congregation. And he says, there is a woman in our parish who is leading an illicit Bible study. She is at risk of eternal damnation, have nothing to do with her. And I'm not, do you know why I have this? I have this memorized because it was every week. Yeah, right. So I'm just like, oh my word. And it was in front of my kids and everybody would turn and look at me because everybody knew it was me. And it would be week after week after week. So,
oh my gosh.
So when we moved to the US, I was like, let's hightail it out of this church, because my dad was the executive pastor at a wonderful mega church in DC, and we'd moved to Annapolis, Maryland. So we were within driving distance. And I was like, it's time to make the move. Like, I've given this a try for 10 years. It's not really great. And let's make a switch. Yeah. But my husband really, really was committed to staying and was really starting to grow in his faith, which I thought would mean, well, he'll certainly therefore want to leave. And it actually made him want to stay, although he couldn't really tell me why, which I found not very compelling. And it was right in the midst of that Walking with Purpose began. And in its earliest stages. So what happened was we lived in Annapolis. We've been living there a couple months, and I was invited to come to a gathering of young women at a woman's home to start a family club. And this is how the conversation went at home. I'm just going to be honest. And I've gone back to the young woman who is a dear friend of mine who organized it, so I can say this. I'm like, okay, this is so stupid because there are so many needs in the world. There's so many people who don't know Christ, and we are going to put our energy into a family club. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a blessing of the animals, or maybe we're going to do movie night in the parish hall, or maybe we'll have the kids go and sing at a nursing home. And all the while, people around us don't know the Lord. But this is what we're going to do. And my husband, Leo, looked at me and he's like, maybe you could go to the meeting before you judge everyone, since you don't even know them. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go. So I went. And I am not kidding when I say that the first suggestion was, wait for it, a blessing of the animals. And then movie night in the parish hall, and then going to the nursing home. So of course I'm totally checked out there. I'm like arms folded inwardly. I'm like, this is so dumb. This is exactly what I thought it was going to be. And then the room got kind of quiet. And one of the women said, you know what? All of that is really great for everything out there. And she kind of gestured out in front of her. And she said, but what about in here? And pointed at her heart. She said, I want to know God personally, and who's going to help me with that? And the room got really quiet. And I was not known by these women at all. I'd not lived in the area. I wasn't in a relationship really with any of them. But someone said, Lisa Brenninkmeyer leads Bible studies. And to this day, I don't even know why she knew that. And they all looked at me and said, will you do that for us? But let's remember that I wanted to go to my dad's church in McLean, Virginia. I was not wanting to dig in and commit where I was. So I said, I would have to go home and ask my husband's blessing for that. And I knew he'd say no, because he was always like, oh my gosh, with you, it's all the spiritual stuff all the time. Can't we just go do something fun? But I went home and I told him about the evening, and he, who had honestly found my over involvement in church related activities kind of aggravating for these first 10 years of our marriage, looked at me and said, I think you might have been made for this.
Wow.
And in that moment, this is a true story. Our dishwasher started overflowing with suds, like, from a movie. Water started pouring through our light fixtures into the floor below, and everything started flickering light-wise. And Leo looked at me and said, now I know you're supposed to do this.
Can I go back, Lisa, on something you said, though? Like, how did you not get bitter, or, when the priest is like from the altar putting you down, and such a good effort, from such a good heart and desire, and then you hear this? How do you jump back and say, I'm still going to do and you stop it or shut it down? How do you go back to the next place and say, I'm going to I'm going to be involved in the church? Like, how did you just not maybe say, maybe I need to leave? Or maybe it sounds like you already were a little bit along those lines.
I wanted to leave, but the reason why I was never bitter toward that man is because I felt like he could see through me. I had not received good RCIA formation, and I knew that. And I knew that I wasn't this super qualified, equipped woman to be doing this. Like, I knew I didn't have a theology degree. I knew I hadn't studied any of this in college. I knew that I was just a woman who knew how to relate to people who were seeking. So I felt like you see my weaknesses, and you're right. Those are my weaknesses. And so I wasn't critical of him for noting that, which, I mean, and frankly, I could have been. Lisa at age 55 would have spoken strongly back. Like, I would not have responded the way I did, but I was at the time, I was in my 20s. It was,
You accepted authority more than,
Yeah, and a lot of insecurity around what I knew. And I bring that up because I think there's so many men and women that are being called by the Lord to step out into the church and make a difference, because we are the people as lay people who are the closest to the unchurched, who know them best, who love them, who are in relationship with them. And so often we feel unqualified because of a bajillion and one reasons that we list, when that's not actually what matters most. It's not all those qualifications, but I think I was so aware of what I was not good at, and the authority point was a big one. I was never bitter, but I was hurt. That's what I would say. Sure. I would say I was deeply hurt. And I didn't even really think much of that time until years later. And I was actually speaking, you were there, Tom. Actually, we were together at the Amazing Parish Conference, the very first one. Wherever were we? I don't know.
I think Colorado. Yeah, Denver.
Okay, yeah. Denver. And Pat Lencioni knew this part of my story, because when we met, early days of Walking with Purpose, and he challenged me, like, he didn't know if I had the grit to fight. Like, he was kind of challenging me as a leader. And I ended up like really getting fiery with him and sharing the story. I'm like, oh, you think I haven't fought for stuff? You think I haven't had to fight within the church I'm like, you're so off. And like, I like went off, and he's like, oh, dang. He's like, okay, you have. And that's what you need to share with the priest coming to this. I'm like, why would I share this? It's so negative. It's like saying, one of your own treated me this way. He's like, nope, I think you need to share it. And I did, as a part of that. And at the end of my talk, there was a line of priests, like deep, coming up to apologize on behalf of that priest. Wow. It was such a beautiful healing moment, and I didn't expect it. But if you're a priest listening, never question the power of your voice to speak on behalf of your brother priests and to speak into those places, because that was very, very healing for me. But what really got me, moving past hurt, moving past what could have been bitterness, was love for the women sitting there. And that's always the deal, right?
When they asked you to do the Bible study, did you think, I got to go ask my parish priest? Or you just, they're like, when they said, Lisa, we want you to lead us in this.
Yeah, no, I knew I needed to go to our parish priest. Yeah.
You did? Okay.
Oh, there's so many stories about these early days. There's some crazy stories. Yeah, so I went to him, and he gave us approval. And so we started out in this one room downstairs, and with the kids next door to us. So there were like 8 of us in our room, and then probably at least that many kids next door. And what happened, and so this is a very big part of my conversion story, is that I was so afraid of getting in trouble again. And I thought, he's going to come and listen at the door, which he didn't. But I'm like, what if he did? Like, I better make sure that I'm not saying anything that is just really like Protestant with my Catholic, covering on. Like, right. I knew how much of my formation was still very much Protestant. So I began to read and study, really in order to not say something wrong, rather than reading and studying, because I actually thought there was richness and truth and teaching here that I really needed. And lo and behold, I happened upon teaching that so rich with life application, that would speak so deeply to my heart, that would draw me into such intimacy with the Lord. I had no idea. And so the way I would describe it is, I'd been sitting on this treasure chest for 10 years as a Catholic with no idea what was inside. But that's what caused me to start reading. And what really made a difference for me was reading converts. So it was Patrick Madrid, it was Jeff Cavins, it was Scott Hahn, it was especially Kimberly Hahn in particular, because she was reluctant. She was, it took a little while for her as a slow burn, and I related to that. And that was a transformative period of time for me to realize, oh, wow, I've really been wrong. And can I just say, what a gift it is as a young person to have a major paradigm shift in your life and to realize you can be really wrong about something that you really thought you were right about. And then you can shift and you can learn and you can go in a different way. And as I grow older, I see this as being more and more important, that I continue to have this posture of learning and that I'm willing to shift paradigms. I think we need that. I think we especially need that in a world that is quick to think that we in the church are quite out of touch and maybe very knowledgeable about what we're knowledgeable about, but not knowledgeable about their own experiences. And I think that served me well in more recent years.
Lisa, what were the things that, just do one comment. I feel like I'm the same way growing up Catholic, and I always say I grew up Philly Catholic. So I feel like I had all that stuff there. And to me, it was learning from the evangelical churches. And I say about a personal relationship with Jesus, about the scripture, that music, which I love music, could move my heart to Jesus, which, the music I listened to and I loved, didn't do that.
Yeah.
And, so I do think too, that's a great point. At some point, the paradigm shift, the embracing more of what Christ offers too. And, anything on those treasures? I mean, you probably could go a whole bunch. We could probably spend the rest of this podcast on this, but any particular treasures or moments that woke you up, or that were, this is what I realized I had that I didn't know?
I would say yeah. I mean, well, certainly the Eucharist, that was huge to really understand the real presence, and also with the real presence to understand that there is always a leap of faith. I think for a long time I waited to just have this like electrifying moment in Mass where I'd be like, and now I've proven that I really believe, but realizing that with everything, there's going to be a leap of faith and I'm going to be saying, I believe, help my unbelief. And I'd been taught my whole life about, the story in scripture about the manna being given to the Israelites, but you had to collect it every single day. If you thought I'm going to do a super much today and then just coast tomorrow and still be nourished, it would have all gone bad. I'd always been taught that's how you need to approach scripture, read it daily. And when I started to realize the Eucharist could nourish me in that same way, that was a huge light bulb moment. I feel like I owe a lot of what I learned about the Eucharist to Jeff Cavins in particular. I would say that learning the significance of the saints and the richness of 2,000 years of understanding of human nature, that the church has this wealth of understanding of who we are, how we tick, and, going back and reading St. Bernard of Clairvaux and the Four Loves, and just understanding human love better and the growth towards love of God. St. Ignatius and spiritual exercises, root sin, discernment of spirits, all these things were very new to me. But probably the thing more than anything that to me felt like, okay, I did not have this in the Protestant church and I have it here in the Catholic Church, is an adequate response to suffering. So I have read and studied deeply in the evangelical space, but when it comes to suffering, I have not been satisfied with the way things were explained in terms of, but what am I supposed to do right now in the midst of this? And growing in understanding, which has entirely come from the Catholic Church, of redemptive suffering has been life-changing for me. And the response to, I really love Dr. Bob Schutz and his entire ministry, Be Healed, Healing the Whole Person. His melding of the fact that we all walk around with significant wounds that have come when we've agreed with the enemy and his lies, and that in the midst of that, as we heal, we are going to have suffering, but it can be redemptive, and Jesus is our example. And that teaching for me changed me deeply, and this is where I see that being taught. I don't hear the equivalent being taught in the evangelical church.
Amazing. Now, Lisa, you talked now about kind of how this conversion happened is you started diving more into the catechism and understanding the beauty and the big T tradition in the Catholic Church. What sort of transformation and conversions have you seen as women come through Walking with Purpose?
Oh, so many. It is, yeah. What an incredible gift it is that when I go and speak or when I'm just reading letters that women give me, that over and over and over again, I hear women say, this has changed my life.
Yes.
Utterly. And they say it through tears. They say, I mean, it's so beyond a woman going, that was a really good book. I learned a lot from that. I think we say things like, oh, wow, that impacted me. Women are like, no, like before and after. Everything in my life changed. It saved my marriage. It introduced, probably the thing we hear the most is I never knew. I went to Catholic school. I've been a faithful Catholic my whole life. I never knew Jesus's love for me was personal. I never knew I could know him in this way. I never knew that scripture could speak personally to my heart. And, when women experience that, everything changes because they are then able to go to the Lord for what they need. And they're no longer expecting husbands to do what only Jesus Christ can do. They're given a roadmap for decision-making, for prioritizing life, for what matters most. They are overwhelmingly experiencing the power of being forgiven and of forgiving others. That would perhaps be one of the things I hear most often is as, women are experiencing or really are encountering the mercy of God, that allows them to then in turn forgive others. And they're learning how to do that and what that looks like. And then another very transformational element of it all as we live at a time that's incredibly lonely and isolated, and we read the statistics and we know that none of this is trending in good ways, right? What women in Walking with Purpose are experiencing is a sisterhood that I use the word sisterhood instead of community because yes, it's an experience of community, but it's stronger than that. It's more intimate than that. And it's accompanying women on all their different stages of life. So I just had time with a dear friend who I started walking in small group Bible study, Walking with Purpose, very early days, actually way back in Germany, early days. And we have walked through being young moms together. We've walked through tremendous loss together, all sorts of things. And she just lost her husband this summer and just came to visit. And we're now walking through her widowhood. And she's not alone. And just to see the impact of fellow sisters in Christ around each other in these various stages of life is beautiful, and it's how it's meant to be lived. So that's also very transformative for women.
I think that's one of the really special things about it too, is that women from all stages of life can feel that sisterhood and can have those spiritual mothers pouring into. I love that that's one of the topics that are discussed. My first Walking with Purpose Bible study was in 2017. And ironically, Tom, it's also the same year I read the book Rebuilt. So this is a full circle moment for me right here. But in reading that, this was a Walking with Purpose where it was for young moms. They had childcare for the kids, which was huge. I mean, that idea alone was just a way to evangelize to the rest of us. But the beautiful thing was we had some women who had been there, right? They were walking this journey and they could pour into us as spiritual mothers. And the two women that were that for us still are they still are that for all of us, which is great. And our lives have all changed. We've all gotten jobs and, have moved on as our kids grow up. So it's been a little bit different, but they're always checking in. They're always there. That sisterhood doesn't end just because maybe you started a new group or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I can't talk to sisterhood, but it's interesting, Lisa. We had Chris Stefanik on recently, and same thing about the need. Paul talks about spiritual fathers. You have many guides, but few fathers. And I think, obviously, fathers and mothers in the faith, that's exactly right. And the need for intergenerational as well, and walking with each other. walking with people through the same life stages. Can I go back a little bit though? I would like to, and sorry, I know you guys will probably talk more the walking with purpose, because again, that's your thing. So I apologize. I'm going to go a little bit more to the leadership thing, or kind of the call. So Lisa, for me, I didn't plan to care about parishes. I don't know why. That's what God's called me to do. It's the call on my heart that I want to see parishes thrive. That was never my plan. That wasn't. When for you did it become the plan? Like, when did you become clear? Like, I'm called to minister to women. It sounds like it was there in seed form, but was there an aha moment? Like, I'm dedicating my life to women, this sisterhood, to women knowing that Jesus loves them and developing this sisterhood. Can you talk about that at all?
I would say in its earliest stages, what I would notice now looking back is that there's nothing I loved more than going out with friends, but then staying in the car till 2 a.m. in high school to talk about the Lord and to talk about faith, because I could see things that my friends were struggling with, and I knew that the Lord would make a difference. And so it was love for those women, knowing there is confusion in your life and there is powerlessness in your life that does not need to be. And so it was out of love for these friends of mine, really, in early days. And that's what early on, when Walking with Purpose began, well, maybe not early. Maybe this is a later reflection from my husband. He's like, a lot of people could say Walking with Purpose has grown the way that it's grown because, you've written good Bible studies, and or you know how to gather people, you know how to teach people how to do small groups, and you know how to inspire in that way. He said, I don't believe it's any of those things. He said, you love women. You love them. And that's what I witness. And I think it really is, it's a gift from the Lord, that love, that burden. And it comes out of being close enough to people that you see the depth of their suffering, and you've listened to their stories. Because it's interesting, I did women's ministry for so many years. I mean, I started really proactively in college. That's when I was leading my first Bible studies in an organized fashion. So I don't know, it's been like, 36 years, something like that I've been doing it. But in the past, I would say 8 years, the Lord has set my heart on fire in kind of a different way. And it started in the same way. It started in getting to know high school girls and their unique struggles and their stories. And instead of coming to them thinking, I've got all these solutions, and if you will just sit down, I will pass them on to you. It started with just a deep love for these girls and listening to what their questions actually were. And honestly, waiting to see, does God help with this? You know what I'm saying? Like maybe their greatest struggles aren't things that there's this real tight spiritual application, but not surprisingly, the things that they were struggling with are those core questions that people struggle with. But what led me into it all was just a deep, deep love for these girls. And something Sherry Waddell said to me years ago. So Sherry, if you don't know of her, she does tremendous teaching on the charisms. And I met with her at, I don't know, we were at some mutual event, and we were discussing, what my spiritual giftings were. And she said, well, I think you have the spiritual gifting of pastoring, because, that just would be evident in what you've ended up doing, loving to gather women, loving to pour into people spiritually and create those kinds of communities. And what she said to me was, so make sure, she said, this is by way of warning, that in the work that you're doing, you don't get so far away from that core call that you are now mainly doing administration, mainly leading an organization, mainly going out and speaking, where there is a distance when you speak that's very different than being in tight relationship with people you're pastoring. She said, stay close. She said, you should always be leading a small group. You should always be in that kind of relationship with people. That will keep your fire going. And if you pull too far away from it, what you're going to start to find is the call dims. It starts to really feel like work. But if you keep it close to the people who were originally the ones that drew you in, why? Because you love them, because you care. That will keep the fire and the call really hot, which it has done.
Oh, that's such great advice for our listeners. When I think about the pastors out there that are listening and our lay leaders that are out there, this is something that's so important, because we know that in church world, it gets so busy. There is a lot of administrative work to do. There is a lot of planning, a lot of execution that has to take place. But Lisa, you're right. By them spending time leading a small group, staying connected with the people, that's going to help them stay true to the mission.
It's really important. Like, I just even think right now, and then Tom, I'll let you speak. I feel like I'm talking on top of you. But yeah, being the CEO of Walking with Purpose, I could be doing admin stuff all the time. I mean, and one could argue maybe I should be. Maybe I'm leaving some things undone. But I was just at church a couple weeks ago, and we're up here in Camden, Maine. I think it's fair to say this is mission territory. This is not the same as moving from Catholic land in Florida, where we had just these, huge parishes. And there was a young woman who had come to the parish. She was just visiting and just dipping her toe back into the church, just hadn't really had any experience of growth, but something was calling her back. And I looked at her and I just thought, I have time really to meet you and say, I hope you find your people, and then get on to other things I had on my plate. But as I visited with her, I'm like, why do I think this should be someone else? I'm meeting her for coffee. I'm going to give her the time to pour in with her and start discipling her, because she was very specifically asking for that. And what I found was, you are lighting my fire again, because I am here now with someone who has never heard these things before. So as she's like, this is how you pray. It's like so thrilling. It reignites in us what those things are. So to be with people one-on-one or in small groups for whom this is good news, and this is actually new news, it's thrilling. So Tom, what were you going to say?
Well, I think it's important, like you said, you knew that about yourself, either in spiritual gift as a leader, to know what are those things that fire you up. It's interesting. So one of the relationships I have is with a guy who's a CEO of Glassdoor. His name's Robert Holman. He goes to one of the parishes we work with and developed a good relationship. And once in a while, I talk to him. And he's a coder, that's what he loves doing. And then, he built, super smart, whatever. But we were talking, and I was talking about, for me, it's writing and speaking actually are the things. If he's like, don't give that up. Like, same exact thing, especially writing. Like, when I do not write, I feel I am not doing what God has called me to do, or creating that kind of content or speaking. And so I think probably the leadership lesson for everybody is just know what does fuel you. There are some things. Now, I think for most pastors, church leaders, we're always saying you got to delegate, let things go. We hold on to too much. And I think that instinct, I would encourage, delegate, get rid of. But when there is that thing, that fuels you, whatever that is, and that could be for you, for you, Lisa, you're probably more an extrovert. I'm more an introvert. It's going to be that time to think deep thoughts, to create content. I can't let that go, even though I can get pulled, like constantly my calendar's being pulled away from that, and trying to protect that time. I think that's just such a great leadership insight that, I just wanted to pause on that to make sure everybody kind of hears that.
Well, Lisa, as we wrap things up, wait,
we're wrapping up already?
We got to wrap up.
I thought we were just getting started. This has been so fun.
I agree. I could talk to you guys all day.
We got to have Lisa back on again then. Like, this is great.
I'd love to.
I think the three of us could probably talk all day about all of this and just really geek out over it. And I would love that. So maybe we'll get that on the books. But we do have to wrap up. We want to be respectful of our listeners' time, be respectful of Lisa's time. And Tom, you've got a lot of writing to do. So we want to give you that time back in your calendar too. But Lisa, what gives you hope about what God is doing in the church right now, especially with lay people, being raised up and starting to step into these deeper relationships with Christ, and then in turn, discipling others?
I think I gained the most hope from the young church, and specifically Gen Z. I absolutely am crazy about that generation. And I think that comes from things that I see in their generation so clearly, that there's a deep love and a deep appreciation for the dignity of each and every person. And I think there are things that are just not going to continue on their watch. I think that there's a commitment among their generation to say, not on our watch. And I think a lot of them are corporal works of mercy that are really, really important to tend to, and not just the spiritual works of mercy. I see a blending of the two in that generation. And I feel like sometimes often they're given a pretty bad rap. Like they're addicted to their phones. They're so just, the snowflake generation. They can't handle anything. We've been helicopter parents, blah, blah, blah. What I see in them is actually a deep care and concern for their fellow man, and that they are asking really significant questions, and they're hungry for answers. And there is openness. There is great openness to the Lord, but they're only willing to listen to it from people who really are authentically living things out and are willing to admit their own weaknesses and are willing to learn from them. And so I get a lot of hope actually from what I'm learning from younger followers of Christ, and also those who are not followers of Christ that are teaching me how to love better. So I get a lot of hope in seeing growth in the way that we are loving one another. And I think that is step one in evangelization. If we don't get that right, then I don't know that we have any business jumping to those next steps. And I am encouraged by their generation.
Yeah, as Lisa was talking, it's funny, I started out in youth ministry, and every generation seems to knock the generation coming after them. And I remember writing about this 25 years ago. And again, it's always who's responsible to raise up the next generation? We are. And I do, going back to the whole idea of the sisterhood that you talk about and you promote in Walking with Purpose, Lisa, and it is intergenerational as well as, people, you're able to walk with your friend. But I do feel like there's a continued call, especially I think for everybody, there's a call to be looking at those behind you and investing in them. I don't always know how that is, but again, I think what Lisa is probably, again, much better at than I am, just beginning with love and loving people, and then you'll see the good attributes. So I just kind of echo that, and I feel that call in my life as well.
Well, Lisa, thank you for taking the time to pour into our listeners today. I just know that they're going to leave with so much encouragement after this episode. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I'm happy to come back. It's always fun to talk to you about.
Yes, we'll have to talk about your new book.
Yeah, that'd be great. Down the road, we can.
All right, sounds great. Well, thank you. Thank you to all of our listeners, and we'll see you next time.